Cool.
Piece of
Well,
cake, man.
greetings, fellow soldiers. This is Bitcoin Liberty Live. This is episode 9. We're doing this virtual. I'm in Mississippi.
Yeah, and I'm in
Daniel
Czech
is in
Republic.
Prague.
Yeah,
So
crazy, huh?
we're on opposite sides of the planet now recording this. We're trying out a new system here. We're using Riverside FM. We noticed that that's what Robin uses. It's
Yeah,
easy enough to start up. I figured, hey, let's give this a shot. If this works well, I think it's better than me trying to screen record off a laptop or record off the phone and then do a bunch more editing and the audio sucks and who knows what. So we're
yeah,
going to try this out and see how it goes.
exactly. Seems
And
like it's pretty cool so far.
yeah, I guess it seems clean. It's amazing how this works. The fact that you're in downtown Prague and I'm in the rural, I'll show you here. I'm in the backwoods of Mississippi out here. And out of Bay St. Louis, Waveland area. I've got some property. I love it out here. I guess it's 90 degrees, but in the shade and a slight breeze, I can't complain. My hands are a little
Feels like
sticky, but
89.
it's comfortable.
Is it really?
I find it comfortable. Well, compared to what I've been used to on the coast, in Oregon and in the gorge, when the wind's blowing and it blows,
Yeah.
it just will seem cold or I don't know.
Oh. Oh. I don't
I
know.
don't know how you like the weather in the gorge. I kind of like this warm blanket of humidity out here, but I guess it hasn't gotten old yet. So,
Yeah. Well, wait till, like July or August.
yeah, that's what they say. Come back in August and decide if you want to
Yeah,
move here then.
exactly. Then it gets
Tell
a
me
little
about
swampy.
Prague. You've been there for a
Prague's been
few days
crazy,
now.
man. Like it's been kind of nonstop since I've been here. I got in on Wednesday and I was just gonna go do some touristy stuff, but I fell asleep like a dum-dum. And by the time I woke up, it was kind of too late to do some of that stuff. So the next morning, I woke up late, unfortunately, like, because jet lag, my sleep was all screwed up. I slept right through my alarm. And I didn't get to the convention hall until about 11 o'clock, maybe 11:30 or something like that. But, it was jam-packed and it was, kind of reminded me of Bitcoin Miami, but it had kind of a different vibe around it, and
Sounds much smaller.
it wasn't much smaller. I mean, it's certainly smaller in like the overall footprint, just because Miami was like 3 floors and there's things all over the place and
Spread
whatnot.
out.
But yeah, but here it was basically like the main stage and the expo hall at Miami, and that was pretty much the extent of it. There's like a little outdoor patio area. They had some food trucks and stuff like that, and they had like a little back VIP or not a what do you call it? Their expo stage. And then upstairs they had like the little VIP lounge, which was pretty dope. Um, but yeah, I mean, I went and saw a few speakers. I didn't spend a lot of time floating around the main stage. Like I spent most of my time just talking to people. Like I kept running into people. Like I ran into Eric V. Stacks there. He was awesome. I mean, just a cool guy to hang out with. Like the first night, another fellow, Justin Beecher. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. He's a guy I sort of interact with on Twitter a lot. He was there and he invited me down to this dinner, and there's a whole bunch of guys like just hanging out and having steaks. So I got to meet a lot of really cool people down there. And yeah, I mean, it's just been like that ever since. I spent a pretty good amount of time hanging out and BSing with Robin. He was a super great guy in person. I really, really enjoyed hanging out with him. And
Dinner with
just met.
Robin. And you just watched Eric's talk?
Yeah. He just did his talk. I was actually sitting in the wrong stage. I thought he was in the main hall and he was actually on the expo stage. But he had a great talk. He did a really good job. It's about 20 minutes and it was really, really well attended. Like I saw one guy back there and he's talking like 3 people and it was sort of like, I mean, I felt bad for the guy, but really interesting guy. And yeah, but Eric's talk was really good. He talked about kind of commodity producing and, government regulations and how kind of Bitcoin lines a lot of that stuff, which I thought was really, really solid talk he put up. I met a guy, John Sirianni from Tropic Source. They're a hardware manufacturer. And that was the first presentation I saw on Thursday morning. And it was weird, man, because there's probably maybe 100 people in the audience. I think it's seated, 2,500 or something. So this guy was talking about some really interesting stuff with like hardware security and, just like base layer stuff. You can fingerprint these chips down to the silicone and then they can build security on top of that all the way back up. So it's Yeah, it's a pretty interesting architecture, but they're going to actually be manufacturing chips. And he said one of the things they discovered were, like a lot of the chip manufacturers, they either devoted their security budget to known uses, and it's usually like defense and aircraft and stuff like that, or they just didn't spend any sort of research on like the needs of cryptographic money kind of thing, or they knew about some of the vulnerabilities and just didn't care because they thought, well, it's such a small market, like who's going to care? But now that we're getting into this age of, I mean, he talked a little bit about like just more broadly crypto, but specifically Bitcoin and things like that, and like how we secure hardware. And some of the stuff he's talking about is a lot of the IP is closed source, you can't see it, it's hard to audit and things like that. So they're trying to make it based on RISC-V architecture. They're making it open source, and so it was really fascinating thing.
That seems really important from a base layer first principle perspective. Like when you mentioned last week about Eric Prince when he was on Tucker Carlson, and how they're at the end of that talk, they're making a secure phone that does not leave footprints of yourself all over and locks out the tracking apps and all that. And they realized, yeah, we can kind of modify and crack a Google Android phone or something. But they decided, no, we have to start with the hardware, ground up hardware to do this right.
Yeah.
And that, it might seem kind of like gee, really extreme from the get-go, but down the road, you might find out, oh, yeah, we're stuck. They're putting out new hardware that does whatever it wants. So they're controlling at the hardware level.
Yeah, exactly. And, I mean, it was a fascinating discussion for me just because I had never considered hardware vulnerabilities when it comes, like if you're talking a hardware wallet and all that kind of stuff. But, when you start thinking like nation state actors and stuff like that, it can be pretty daunting to realize, like, especially if you're toting Bitcoin around its size, it's kind of like, it can be sort of, scary, I suppose, to think these I could be hardware vulnerable and not even realize it. I asked him because I interviewed him. I just said, "Hey, would you mind sitting down and chat with me for like 15 minutes?" And I'm just going to write an article on my Medium, just make a little Medium post out of it. But he was really cool about it. He sat down, had a nice little 20-minute conversation with me, and just kind of helped explain. I think a lot of it was just sort of the company pitch, but I mean, I think it's good information people have and at least be aware of, which ties me into another guy named Rick. I don't know Rick's last name, but he was the guy that got hacked for 25 million or 25 Bitcoin down in El Salvador. You remember that guy?
I saw his thread about what the heck happened. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he gave a talk on the expo stage as well. And it was really this really sort of thoughtful and honest conversation about, not getting complacent about your security. And so I thought it was kind of a neat, I mean, just there, it was nice to see people having a broader security focus. And
if I remember, he may have had some keys up on a cloud, or he was with his dad on sharing the account or something, and they didn't know what was going on for a while, but they think something was on the cloud.
Yeah, I mean, the guy said, during his talk, he said, "Look, man, the entropy on our password for the cloud account was so weak, they probably could have brute forced it within, an hour or less." So, and the thing is, now if you look at brute force attacks, they have these things called rainbow tables. I mean, it's not like stuff he was talking about, but the rainbow tables cut down the brute force. Like something, if you just did a straight brute force attack on a password, it would take, let's say a day. Once you incorporate a rainbow table, which sort of gets rid of like 80 or 90% of the common, variations on spellings, like people using a zero for an O or a at for an and a one for an I or something like that. So once you plug in one of these rainbow tables, it just looks for all those known variations. It says the brute forcing on a low entry password, like an 8-character password or something like that, can drop to, seconds or minutes. Like it's literally on just standard laptop hardware. Like it's not even, you don't need anything special to do it. And, that technology is increasing rapidly. I mean, I run Proton, like I'm part of the Proton family, and, their passwords now, they're starting to call them insecure at 16 characters. And, so the security thing is going to become a bigger and bigger issue that I just don't think a lot of people are paying attention to. So it was great seeing Chris talk about that and saying, and, his message was like, look, we got complacent. We had safely stored our Bitcoin for a decade, never really thought about it, never anything, went down to El Salvador to celebrate and just be part of the movement. And he didn't really go into the specifics of how they gained access to his account, but he also brought up a good point. Like, he was part of a Mt. Gox hack. And not only did they steal all the Bitcoin from Mt. Gox, but they stole a lot of personal information as well. So, yeah, it was, it was illuminating. And I mean, I appreciated the guy just for getting up there and having that talk. He works with, uh, gosh, I can't remember the name of the company, Bit something or another. They go around and help people set up security and teach them about security awareness and stuff like that. And so he's kind of, turned his lemons into lemonade, so to speak. But I mean, it's hard to come back from a 25 Bitcoin loss.
Yeah,
But
losing a Bitcoin nest egg like that would just be so devastating to the
devastating.
core. I mean, it's hard to even fathom. And then I'll take my own security for granted. Like, I keep it really tight and locked down, cold storage. I have my processes. I'm air gapped and all that. And then I have to stop and think, like, am I missing something? Because there's a lot on the line here. And when you
Right,
run into the potential, the power of self custody that people can do on their own if they want, when you run that security against user experience or usability where you want it accessible, a lot of people, I think, 99% of people I know are going to have to rely on a trusted party. I think you're going to have it on Swan or Unchained or River. You're going to have to. I mean, you don't want necessarily, I mean, you might in some weird way kind of trust that, okay, grandma has some gold in a safe.
right,
We're just kind of familiar with that. But do you want grandma keeping track of keys to her wallet?
right.
Um, yeah, it's
Well, I mean,
dicey.
there's just so many trade-offs, and that's one of the big problems. And it was a great point that Rick brought up in his talk. He said, "Look, there's all this talk back in the day, like be your own bank." And he goes, "Well, if you were really a bank, like what kind of security would you deploy? Would you just have like a password written down or saved in the cloud somewhere to protect everything?" And it's like, no, of course not. You'd invest a lot of time and effort and energy into securing your bank, right? And and he says, look, man, there's data hacks every day. And, if one of these exchanges gets hacked and they have all your info and they have your home address and they know how much Bitcoin you have, it can be a problem. And one of the things he pointed out was like he had been on Mt. Gox and they would buy on Mt. Gox and then take it off and put it in cold storage. But when Mt. Gox got hacked, like all the customer data got hacked too. And he said, look, I'm I'm tied to this Bitcoin. So these people knew how much Bitcoin I had. And he said that puts me at substantial risk, right? It's like because they can just come and they could have came and done a wrench attack. And how much convincing am I going to be able to do to say no? I've already been hacked. Like I don't have it anymore. And they go, "Oh, you're lying. We're going to torture your kids until you give it up," kind of thing. And he says, even now, even after I've lost it, I'm still at risk. So it's problematic on a lot of levels. And that kind of went back. I guess it's always a security trade-off kind of thing. And I used to talk about this a lot with people that carry guns, because people will say things like, "Oh, you got to carry the biggest caliber you can handle," and this and that and the other thing. And I'm like, yeah, but there's trade-offs to that, right? And you have to realistically assess your threat landscape. And when you start talking security and known unknowns and unknown unknowns and all that kind of stuff, I mean, it's a deep, deep, deep hole. But it's just like if you take all the positive aspects of Bitcoin and all the depth of knowledge that you're going to gain from learning about Bitcoin, there's the counter to that of like all the depths of knowledge that you need to acquire for security, and
Yeah.
there are always trade-offs. There's never perfect security, and somewhere in there there's going to be trust, and I mean, security relies on trust no matter what. And you can say, well, I don't trust anybody. You go, well, you got to trust that your brains aren't going to turn to mush, or you're not going to get a brain worm, or you're not going to conk yourself on the head, or you know or you're not going to lose something or forget something. Or so I mean, ultimately me, like I think it's probably wisest to have like multi-layered, just in terms of access to various stages of secure Bitcoin. And whether you go like, oh, I've got a certain amount parked on a Lightning or Liquid wallet. I mean, I wouldn't say keep all of it there, but if you had like, let's say you had, just to throw a number out, like 100 grand total, maybe you got 10 grand on a Liquid wallet, and maybe you got 20 grand at River, and you got 20 grand at Swan, and you got another 20 grand in cold storage, and then 20 grand somewhere else, or however you want to think about it, or 40 grand in cold storage or something like that. But at
Yeah.
least you have ascending layers of protection, and like it's not you'll never be catastrophically failed out, right? Like you'll always have something. And if you had 90 or $100,000 worth of Bitcoin, and then you only were left with the 10,000 on your liquid wallet, and everything else got wrecked, I'm sure you wouldn't be happy about it. But it's better to start from 10,000 than it is to start from zero, because going from 25 to zero is a real kick in the balls, So you don't want to mess with that.
Yeah. And there's times where, it's like you can steadily DCA for a period of time, and then you're like, okay, it's time to move one good UTXO to my next layer of security, like now. Big UTXO, locked away, not touching it, whatever. And there's a pucker factor in doing that when, when you've done it many, many times, you're like, okay, I know how to do this, but I have to stop and think, okay, step by step here, do a little test transaction. Okay, yep, that worked. That $20 went through. Okay, now with the real one again.
Yeah.
And someday I think there's going to have to be technology or tools that both make this easier but maintain security. But it's hard to teach awareness to people when they just are trying to, awareness is hard to teach, and you don't know what you don't know. And so, like,
Right.
okay, yeah, I'm following steps here. I know I can do this, 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 and it works. You're not always thinking of everything. Or you're like, oh, yeah, I was online using a Wi-Fi at a hotel, and what network am I on? Or even when you have encryption or you're using things. The Bitcoin Veterans podcast that Travis was on, I think, yeah, it was yesterday.
Right.
I listened to that, and it is actually pretty incredible. Now these are some edge case extreme hackers, but the stuff you can do to hack Wi-Fi networks and be a man in the middle, or reach into a Wi-Fi network from a more of a distance and see who's there and sniff it, just sit there
Yeah.
and listen.
Right.
Not that people are following you, but then again, it the capability is there. And then
Yeah.
then I get paranoid, like, oh my goodness, what network
Yeah.
am I on?
Exactly. Well, I mean, I VPN everywhere I go. Like I got a VPN on my phone, I got a VPN on my computers, but there's times where like you'll disable the VPN for some reason or something's bouncing on you, and then you forget to turn it back on. And next thing you know, you've been surfing the web for 15, 20 minutes on God knows what connection, and God knows who's snooping. And today, I mean, most sites are using HTTPS, so they're not able to kind of get too much from you. But it just takes that one little combination of events. And like you said, even just moving stuff around in size, like there is a definite pucker factor, right? It's like when I took all my stuff off of Kraken, and I was just like, ooh, and I've moved, like I said, my tax returns, not last year, but the year before, were 685 pages, and that's all transactions. And
Yeah,
so I'm very comfortable moving, shit coins around, and it's the same process basically. And yet, even when I was moving those around, I moved $500, $1,000. It was always just like, all right, just double check, triple check, check again, walk away, come back, and just every single letter. But I have an eye for that kind of detail. Like we used to do like hashes on files that we would get from like Disney or Paramount or something like that. And I would check them. I would manually check the hashes, because I
yeah,
would watch people go through and just sort of go, oh, it's close enough or whatever. And the thing is, there's no way to verify the hash without actually just looking and making sure that they match exactly. And
yep,
that's a low risk area. Like, if there's some little artifact or something in a JPEG file or a PNG that you're going to put up on some TV show, it's like big fucking whoop, right? But
yeah. Like
uh,
even downloading, I downloaded. I was running, getting Lightning started, and downloaded Sparrow Wallet from a known GitHub source. And
ooh,
granted, I'm following trusted steps to check on things. The OPSEC on it all, it's like verify that what you just downloaded is what you thought you downloaded. You could say, wow, this is extreme, but also it's like, nope. If you're going to rely on this like forever, you
yeah.
better know that the foundation is there, and you don't have to
Yeah.
think about it after that.
Well, that was sort of Rick's point, is he said you do have to think about it after that. And he said, look, man, if you're not running a node, you should run a node. If you're not mining, you should mine. If you're not, understanding what UTXOs are, you're not doing that right. I mean, you should look into Tor. You should look into, because every time you send a transaction, your little X FUD's floating around. And I mean, he brought up a lot of points in that he got complacent and he got wrecked because of it. And he said that complacency is, knowledge killer, right? And the second you let yourself kind of get lazy about stuff, and it's easy to do, especially if you're just, staying humble and stacking sats, like, and that's sort of, I mean, it calls into question a lot of assumptions I make or presumptions I make about, like, well, just how secure are you and all that kind of stuff. And I think you brought up a good point. I mean, sooner or later, like you can't live in a world without trust. Ultimately, like, it just doesn't work. That's not how humans are built, right? And there's a lot bigger risks out there that people don't think about. Like, there's a great hardware hacking. These guys go around and they talk about hacking devices, and by devices I mean like crash bars on doors and auto motion sensors, and these guys just go around and let themselves in everywhere. And they say, look, there's like 14 keys. If you own 14 keys, you basically have keys to 95% of the locks in the world. And people routinely just leave things like that. Like, even where I work right now, there's a crash bar on the front door. There's a gap about this big across the bottom of the door, and there's a little rod you can just stick up underneath it and hit the crash bar, and you're inside the, So I got this big elaborate lock that probably cost $1,500 to secure the door, and then a $2 metal bar can just open the door from a crash bar. And you go, well, what was the point of all that? I spent all this money on this lock, and we got all this electronic shit and RFID stuff. I mean, they can clone those RFIDs. They just have to sit down next to you, literally. And like those little chips that you use, they can just scan that, pick it up, they can clone it, and then they just walk around everywhere you go. And it's a nothing burger attack. It's the easiest thing in the world. And people secure lives and money and all kinds of stuff with things like motion sectors, detectors, and crash bars and RFID chips, and they don't even think about it. So I think it's kind of a twofold problem. Is like you can find yourself wandering down some crazy matrix land rabbit hole of like getting so paranoid about your security that you don't think about anything else, and and just realize that you're vulnerable in a lot more ways than you think. It's just people kind of rely on the fact that most people don't know how to do that, and yada yada yada. But I mean, if you're against a nation state actor, if you're like Ed Snowden or Julian Assange, I mean, if you look at the sort of efforts that they took to conceal their locations and all that kind of stuff, it's insane, right? Like, Ed Snowden was talking about taking his phone apart and disconnecting microphones and shit like that. So you kind of go, well, how much of a target am I? How realistic is an attack against me? What attack vectors am I vulnerable to? And and the most obvious are ones like they just come after your family, and you just go, well, all the security in the world you have, if someone's going, I'm going to cut your kid's head off or something, you're just like, well, do I just keep holding out on the Bitcoin thing, or, because, I mean, it gets tough, right? So.
Yeah, there's a lot of aspects to all that to consider, and it's a different space to get your mind around compared to what you are used to thinking about when you have a bank or a trusted third party, and you can't get complacent. You have to always kind of be thinking about it, learning, reading the field, and if something comes up or people are talking about stuff, how does that apply to what you're doing, and just approach that again. Now, to get into the conference again where you're at, you were
oh yeah, I was hanging out with
Adam Back. You hung out with Adam Back?
Yeah, me and him are tight, man. We're buddies now. We're like this.
He's a mellow, low-key guy, soft-spoken.
Yeah. Super mellow guy. He was given an AMA on Friday, I think, yesterday, or maybe it was Thursday. Geez, I can't even remember. Like, all these days are blurring together for me. I went up and was watching him during the AMA, and I mean, he was, they were asking, all the usual questions. There was a ton of stuff about Craig Wright, which I was like, I don't give a shit about Craig Wright.
That guy, yeah.
And it's like, why are we still talking about this one fucking asshole that was just trying to hustle everybody?
I never want to hear his name again. It's like,
right. I mean, it's like
such a heaping, stinking pile of crap that is hopefully composting in history, and just goodbye. I hope he gets hammered. I hope he gets hammered in the sentencing. And he's a footnote in history in terms of like the amazing sociopathic, psychopathic capability of people.
Yeah.
But it's such a weird anomaly. It's like, let's forget about him already.
Right. Yeah. But people are real wrapped up in drama. I mean, people just love talking about dramatic shit, I guess. I don't know. But I was really surprised. Like, I'm going, you've got one of the OG creators of Bitcoin, basically. I mean, the guy that was there at the birth of the movement, and you want to ask him about some fucking tabloid shit. I'm just like, Jesus, couldn't you think of anything else but this, you know? And the one question I asked him, he was kind of like, yeah, well, that's a problem. You know, I mean, that was like the best of his answer. And I can't remember exactly how I phrased it, but I just said, hey, look, man, what do you think about minor concentration and like, you know, and the risk of inbound transaction censorship? And he goes, well, you know, minor concentration is a problem. And, you know, the problem that everybody has, and it's sort of tragically under talked about thing in Bitcoin in general, is like, that's a huge deal. You know, like it doesn't take much to concentrate that hash. And as one of some shitcoiner, some Bcash guy was making fun of me, I think he called me a sweet summer child. And I was like, what are you talking about, bud? Like, I don't know. So what, fucking nodes, man? Well, you know, there's 10,000 nodes out there. They'll fix it. And he goes, node cannot fix an inbound censorship problem. I go, what are you talking about? I've never heard this before. Please explain. And he explained it to me. He was a really great guy. And, you know, like I fundamentally disagree with his ideas about Bitcoin Cash, but I go, well, but he did bring up a valid point. I've been asking people since, and I've never heard a good answer for it. And I'm just like, that sounds like a problem. That sounds like a gaping hole in the matrix that somebody probably needs to figure out on some level. And people are talking about, but I think it ties into like the ordinals conversation and all that kind of stuff. Like, do we filter transactions? And the second you filter something, you're a censor. And if you're going to censor the network, then all of a sudden you're not decentralized and secure anymore. You're centralized. You're actively, you know, you're creating new rules. And the problem with the rule set is there's no way to enforce a transaction. Like, and I mean, there's pluses and negatives to that. You can go, okay, an inbound transaction, some miner can choose not to accept that transaction. They go, nope, don't look at it. In fact, they'll warn you if you go and lotto mine, if you buy a lotto miner from someone and you're running it to your own node and you're just trying to do, you know, solo, like give me my 1 in 2 million per day chance of getting a Bitcoin or something. They'll tell you, look, your transaction can get bounced. You can have a valid transaction that can go through, and then the network can just go, no, we're not taking that one. We're going to take the next block. Sorry, buddy. You don't get that block, so you can get bounced, you know. And I don't think it happens frequently, but I'm sure there are solo miners out there like, dude, I hit a block. Oh, I didn't get the block. Oh shit. What, you know. But that, you know, there can be varying reasons for that. But you know, and I don't know enough about the process of mining to understand how it is that they can pick and choose transactions coming in and how that gets collated through the mempool and stuff like that. But if you have a group of miners working together, like the race is on the back end of like which chain is going to be the valid chain, right?
Right.
And if there's enough people to get together and say, hey, we think this is the valid chain and we just didn't happen to include Fritz's transaction, then you got bounced. And if you just happen to be on a list and they say we don't accept transactions from Fritz because he's on the list, then you're but you're censored, you know. And that sort of defeats a lot of this sovereign property rights stuff.
Yeah, and there's a kind of a predatory thing that a lot of these big mining operations do too, is that even after a block is discovered, they'll keep mining off their own attempted block to try to double up more quickly and then just have the longest chain and claim,
Right.
hey, no, ours is longer now. And it's like, and then the rest of the nodes are reconciling like, okay, so Foundry now got 2 in a row.
Right.
True. You know, and those kinds of tricks. And it's just, I mean, not that it doesn't violate any rules. It's just like your metaphor with a game. The rules are there and people are going to push on the rules anywhere they can. And it's not breaking the rules. It's just aggressive.
Right. It's just testing. Yeah.
So, exactly. And that's where I think that nodes need to be distributed, even, you know, large pools and stuff. I would love to see America endorse Bitcoin more and say, hey, this is important. Like maybe they're not all in, but America is going to support, whether they, you know, this is all fiat, but, you know, whether they support, subsidize, or do it themselves and get in on it, mine or whatever. And people could see that as, oh no, America's going to try to take a big slice of mining. I think it's just more diversification. I think it would be another big player in the field. That, yeah, it's a nation state. Yeah, they have their national interests and priorities. But are they going to just cooperate with Antminer and China and stuff?
Right.
Probably not. You know, they're probably competing with those guys.
Yeah.
Or just they have different interests. And so even if America went whole hog all in, and the NSA's giant building of CPUs and stuff all started hashing and stuff, you could say, oh my gosh, America is now, say, a quarter of the global hash rate.
Right.
That's probably healthier.
Potentially,
And
yeah.
then so, whether El Salvador or other nations all over start doing that too, of all the nations in the world and all the little stranded energy sites all mining away at their at best will they can, America could only have so big of a slice, and that would be still diversified,
Yeah,
I
potentially.
think.
Well,
So
the trouble is like I'm actually trying to look right now, like where I think there's something like 40% of the global hash is, in the US right now, right? And
they're just, a lot of the pools are pointing towards some of the Chinese pools.
yeah. But I mean, it's the thing being is if you have like, and I think this goes back to a lot of those arguments that you see online of like who, who's controlling most of the hash, and the problem of, like increasing equipment costs and things like that. And that's sort of the Bitcoin Cash guys thing, is they go, you can't let the equipment cost go so much or else you centralize all mining. And the flip side of that is, well, if you don't allow the centralization of mining, you end up centralizing the nodes, because it gets fewer and fewer people can run a node because of the size constraints, right? And it's like the node protects you against a split, right, like a fork, but mining protects you against censorship. So you kind of go, well, where do you end up? And like right now, what is it saying? It's like, yeah, as a percentage of hash, it's saying US is 37.84% of hash, right? And the thing is that it doesn't take much from there to sort of start tinkering with stuff, and especially if America really does launch and become like the biggest thing in mining. But there's a really brilliant kid from Nigeria. I can't remember the name of his VC fund that he runs. He's a African kid, really really smart kid. I mean, just really eloquent, really thoughtful, and like 25 years old. I mean, he's just a kid, like literally. But he was talking on the VIP stage, and there was maybe 10 people watching this kid, and so it was just right there face to face. You got to talk to him a little bit. I actually sent his thing to Robin. I said, you should really check this kid out. He's brilliant. He'd make a great guest. And he was saying, look, man, I think Africa is the future of Bitcoin. He said, like all the talent, like he said, because we're the hungriest of the entire world, and we're the most kind of chaotic right now. But there's all kinds of people coming into Africa to try and exploit like cheap energy and skirt regulations and do all this kind of stuff. But he said, they're starting to, like when he started in the Bitcoin space, he said there was like one core dev that lived in Africa, and he said now there's like 500. And he said all the talent is down there, and these kids push good code, and they're getting used to like the peer review process, and and they do have cheap energy, and they have abundant resources, and and they have a hungry population and a young population. I mean, like it's something I can't remember exactly what he said, but it's a really huge percentage of people that are young in Africa that are it's not like here in America where we're all kind of old, right? Or
And
maybe not.
horribly broken money. I mean,
Yeah,
they know what it. See, it's easy to not understand Bitcoin when you think your money is good, but when you come from a land or a nation where you're just so used to money being broken already,
right.
yeah, you'd like the US dollar, it's better, but something like Bitcoin, you could understand quickly and be like, aha,
Yeah,
fixed money,
yeah.
please.
Well, that was one of the cool things he said was like, my mom is all in, and she's one of the older generation. She's all in on Bitcoin, and he's all in on Bitcoin. And so I think, but the thing is, if you start talking about the distribution of hash, like if you get, because right now Africa makes up about 1% of global hash. But if you get that up to like 15, 20%, something like that, you get, South America get up to 15, 20%. And then you got maybe 10, 15% in the US and 10 or 15% in the United States. And all of a sudden that centralization of mining power goes down, But the guy in Africa was talking about like, look, we have different problems than you do. Like if one of our miners goes down, we have to figure out how to fix it, not because just getting things in and out of the country is a pain in the ass. And there was a guy asked, one of the audience members asked a question, goes, hey, have you ever considered coming to DevHack, 2022? And he said, we tried and our visas got bounced, like because we're coming from Nigeria and they're all afraid that we don't want to go back, So like there's a political issue for us as well. So I mean, they're, but it was just great hearing this kid talk. I was really, really impressed with him. I mean, he was just such an articulate young man, and but full of life and full of energy. And I was almost like, oh, fuck, man, I'm going to Africa. I'm going to go, start doing Bitcoin work in Africa, just because of his enthusiasm. And but it got me thinking about this hash problem and the mining problem. And I go, yeah, we need to be encouraging everywhere to be mining, not just the United States. And I think that sort of selfishness, I was making some sort of pretty bold claims to a lot of really intelligent people over the weekend. And one of them, I said, like, I think within 10 years, Michael Saylor will probably own maybe 1 or 2 Bitcoin. And people are like, what are you talking about? Why would he only own 2 Bitcoin? I'm like, because I don't think he's going to feel like he needs 200,000 Bitcoin anymore. And, it's more a conversation starter than anything, and just to get people talking about stuff. But I had an opportunity to talk a little bit about my book here and there, and just kind of go, well, what's your book about? And then I start, I like telling the little money story, and then, I mean, it's an instant conversation starter. I go, you've heard the story of barter, it turns into money, and then money turns to credit, debt, da, da, da. And that's all fake. And they're just like, what? What are you talking about? And I go, it's actually
that's a good new trope is a negative sounding word, but it's a meme. A meme being a new idea. When you present that to people, everyone from Saylor to Lynn Alden and others are going to say like, huh?
What are you talking about,
and they
buddy?
could understand it pretty quickly to say, oh, maybe they agree or disagree for different reasons, but it's definitely a point of discussion.
Exactly. It gets that discussion rolling, and it's really fun to, I mean, partly it's just me practicing, right? Just going, well, does this message resonate, and is it going to make sense to people when I start explaining it? But then I go into that sports analogy, and I go, okay, think about a game, and soccer. And I go, it's the easiest game in the world. You got to maintain possession of a ball and kick it through some goalposts at the end. Like, it's not rocket science. And now imagine playing that game with no rules. What happens? Everybody, they go, oh, you'll be fighting in 10 seconds. I go, exactly. So, and I'm finding that I think some of these analogies that I already have incorporated in the book are solid, in that if I can get people thinking about stuff in person, then, like, and especially really thoughtful, like Bitcoiners, not like just Joe average guy who doesn't think about money at all, but like people who thought a lot about Bitcoin and are like full on into Bitcoin. And if I can stump them a little bit, I kind of go, okay, that's probably something worth sharing,
Yeah, get them thinking.
And yeah, so it was encouraging on that.
You had dinner with Robin Sayer.
Yeah,
tell me
it was
about
brilliant.
that.
Oh my god, it was so nice, man. Like me and him, like as soon as we met, we were just talking and talking and talking, and it just like it was really like upbeat and positive conversation. And he was busy through the whole weekend, so he was like, I just did my first live interview, and we're talking about his Saylor interview and if he was nervous. And but yeah, I guess it was not last night but the night before, Friday night, I guess, like as the thing was winding down, I was like, hey, do you want to go get some food? And he's like, yeah, sure. And but I met this really great guy, Grafton. I think he's only on Nostr. He's part of a startup here that runs a company called Vexel, VEXL, and they do P2P Bitcoin like meetup. It's like a Bitcoin meetup app, but it's a really unique sort of social. There's a social element tied to it where it's like you can post on it and go, hey, I want to trade cash for Bitcoin, or I want to trade Bitcoin for cash, right? And then like people will post those little things, and if you are one of the people looking to be a counterparty to that trade, you can kind of scroll down the list and go, Fritz is in my area and wants to trade $1,000 for some Bitcoin. I go, well, I really need $1,000 right now, so I'll trade with Fritz. But you can click on it and you can see how many trusted nodes does this guy have. Like if you click on it, you go, Fritz doesn't know anybody I know. So you go, I don't know if I should trade with Fritz, because it's still, you're trading in person and, wrench attack time kind of thing. But he goes, I click on Fritz and it goes, Fritz knows Travis and Fritz knows Bob and Tom, and I know Fritz and Bob and Tom and blah, blah, blah. Okay. So there's 13 connections there. Chances are good this is going to be a pretty secure transaction. And there's a way to audit that where you can reach out and go, hey, I'm thinking about selling stuff to Fritz. What do you think? And they'll go, Fritz is a turd, or Fritz is great. You'll be fine. So you use a social network to sort of increase trust in the P2P transaction, right? Which I thought was great. And I was like, hey, how can I get it? And he's like, well, you got to get test flight, and then you got to go, because we don't offer it in America because we don't want to get shut down. And I was like, God, man, we're just shooting ourselves in the foot for this kind of stuff, just by those sort of regulations. But Yeah, so it was talking to that kid Grafton. He lives in Czech Republic. He's been here 13 years. I call him a kid. He's probably 32 or something. I don't
And
know.
he
But
was with you too, both of
yeah,
you?
like he showed up at this dinner. Like Eric Stacks was there. God, this guy Jeff, just brilliant guy. Really, just sort of peaceful, spiritual guy from Ireland. Super awesome guy to hang out with and talk to. I met this other kid Evan from Thailand, and just totally popped my brain on Thailand and like all the kind of amazing stuff going on there that I had never. Like I always think Bangkok, and when I think Bangkok, I think like fiat, you know. And he's like, no, 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 no. Like I live in northern Thailand, and you can come up and do this. And I was like, dude, I'm there 100%. I want to check this out now. Like it sounds like the kind of place I want to go. But
There's some
nevertheless,
expats love Thailand. You know,
yeah,
you can buy land and develop land and afford it. You know,
yeah, yeah.
compared to the dollar now.
Right, exactly. Well, nevertheless, Grafton said, "Hey, look, man, like you guys are all hanging out in Old Town, and that's the tourist area in Prague." He said, "Just hop on any tram and go outside of Old Town, and then walk to any pub, and you'll get twice the food for half the money, and it'll taste way better." I was like,
Hmm.
"Okay." So when I was talking to Robin, I was like, "Hey, this kid told me if I just go somewhere outside of Old Town, and we're 20 minutes outside of the Old Town already." If we just go to a restaurant around here, it'll probably be better and cheaper. And so we just took a walk. Like we just picked the thing on Google Maps and just started walking there. And we ended up walking through this little neighborhood and kind of ducking under some bushes under this weird little small path. And, we're like in Prague proper, where people like where Czech people live, not like the tourist support lives. And he was 100% right. Like we walked in this place and it got this great steak and it was super tender and I speak enough Czech to get into trouble, I guess. Like I learned really quickly. I just need to tell people I do not understand Czech. I know how to say like three
Yeah,
words.
you tell them that you know a little, and they start blowing at you, and you're like,
Right.
actually, I don't know any.
Yeah, so that's precisely what happened. I went from like rozumím česky jenom trochu, which means I understand a little Czech, to
Yeah,
nerozumím česky. I don't understand any Czech, but
yeah,
mluvím česky jenom trochu. I speak a little and I don't understand any, and that seemed to clear things up a lot faster. But yeah, the Czech people are really nice. I'd seen some lady that did a blog about wait staff in Czech Republic, and she was saying like Americans, they'll go, oh, excuse me, to try and get a waiter server's attention. The Czech people will just sit there and like try and make eye contact. And she said Czech waiters are experts at never looking at you. I'm 100% correct. Like everywhere I went, I was just like, hey, and they're just like, boom, like, I mean, I was just like, man, I've never seen anybody that good at ignoring me. Like when I can just be, hey, and they just walk right past. But I think we were kind of a novelty when we were hanging out in that little Czech restaurant. But yeah, me and him, we just sat there and talked and talked and talked, probably a couple hours over dinner. But it was nice because I got to walk around a little bit and kind of see the city. And then, he went back to the hotel and got ready for Sailorland. And I went back to the hotel and tried to overcome jet lag.
cool. Yeah, you were on Robin's podcast a few weeks ago,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. And you were on
um,
like yesterday or something,
and
right?
then I
2 days ago?
I was on 2 day. Well, was it yesterday? Yeah, I think it
I don't know
dropped
when it
yesterday.
dropped. I watched it. I thought it was great, man. And I'm like, the days are so blurred together right now. But yeah, I thought you were outstanding, man. Like I was really, really impressed with your conversation. I thought it was really, really good.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that because it's so easy. Granted, he's in Munich, effectively recording on his time. It's probably mid morning to midday for him. It's 1:30 going on 3:30 in the morning for me. When I look at the video and I see my dark eyes, and I'm like, yeah, I was tired. And
Yeah.
then I can also self-criticize. I mean, not to be too self-deprecating. At the same time, in my head when I'm talking, it's like pretty decent. And then
Yeah.
when I watch it later, I'm just not that good soundbite guy where I feel like I'm talking, and I like, what am I actually saying? I just keep mumbling.
Ah,
All in
I
all,
think
I
it's
thought it was
great, man.
pretty
I
good.
really, really enjoyed that talk. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
That's
I
good.
thought you did outstanding. So I mean, it was engaging. I watched the whole thing tip to tail. I thought it was great. So yeah, good on you,
Yeah,
man. How was
thank
your
you.
experience? I mean, what'd you think of the whole thing?
Well, one thing is, sorting out how he does his process. What I really like is that he's very supportive of the community and up and coming new
Yeah.
personalities in the space where I could ask, before and after, I could ask him questions about like, how did this work for you? Or what do you do here? And he would just solicit advice on what he did. It's one reason, you and, we've sort of stumbled across this Riverside FM app, methods that Robin uses to process and use effectively, I guess, AI and tools to put it out there and not spend, I can spend hours massaging a video, but it's like for a podcast, do you have that time for the quality you want to get it just right, or can it be good enough and quite watchable? Robin's doing it very well with Riverside.fm.
Yeah.
So we're trying it out here. He wants people to, he made a video about his setup, how he does it,
Yeah.
how to do it. I just really appreciate that stuff. And then he just freely acknowledges, hey, people can steal this video and reuse it. I steal from others and reuse it, whether it's memes or techniques or ideas. It's a very open flowing information exchange to just do it. Everyone do it better and help each other in every way possible.
Yeah.
I like his philosophy on that, how he made it work well. And so that was cool. And then also he can be, at times I'll be rambling on. I'm like, uh-oh, I think he might be bored. No, actually, he made it very clear. Thank you. He's very gracious. He's very appreciative for everyone just participating in this. I appreciated that, just the validation and support. I just really like the guy. His heart's there, and he's a very positive individual.
Yeah, super positive, and he's the same way in person. I mean, he's just a very genuine person. I really appreciated that. So I'm glad you had a good experience, man. Like,
yeah, I like Robin's approach to it, and then it's funny because we talked about all kinds of different topics. I had prepped him with like I have various ideas of things. I think we talked about two of them, and then the others were random other things that he was thinking of that we just went into that were great. And then when the video drops, kind of midpoint towards the end of our talk, I was talking about the transition, like we talked about in our last podcast about fiat mindset, fiat jobs, living in a fiat world as you're making a shift. He asked, how would it affect your job? How would criminal justice or law enforcement be affected by, say, a Bitcoin standard?
Right.
And to be honest, I mean, it would be so unfathomably different in a way that it's hard to know. A lot would still be there, but different. There's a lot that would simply go away because it has to. And when I touched upon that, and like, to be honest, I think, my job could go away. Not that there aren't people that are needed for these kinds of roles in communities, but would it be the job that I have? Right. Probably not.
You never know, right?
You never know. Maybe I'd be that guy who is paid through a mechanism because the community recognizes, we need people to help do this stuff, but I'm paid differently, or it happens differently, or it's on call, or it's steady because there's enough work to do, but you're not necessarily applying for grants or spending money because the budget's there. It would be so different. And so anyway, when the video drops and the headline is, I would lose my job on a Bitcoin standard. And it's like, I guess I said that, but it's definitely attention grabbing.
Yeah.
Part of me thought, wow, that's
well, he's got to play the algorithm.
That's a good line.
Yeah.
I don't disagree. I mean, it's it's eye catching. It's a good headline. Of all the things we talked about, it was like, okay, no, that's good. I'll go with that.
Fine, man. Well, I mean, I really appreciated that discussion you had with him because I thought it was nice to hear you talking about law enforcement, all that kind of stuff. And I think that gets, like when people talk about smash the state and, get rid of fiat and all this kind of stuff, I don't think they understand complexity. I really don't. Like, and I see it like all the time, But one of the great things Saylor said in his keynote this morning, was it yesterday morning? I think it was yesterday morning. Christ, I don't even remember.
I know the days are flowing by when you're traveling.
Just buried, But he did the 21 rules of Bitcoin or 21 laws of Bitcoin or something like that. But one of them is, don't be against fiat, be for Bitcoin. It's a different sort of mindset. But like when it comes to things like people go, we don't need cops. I go, well, yeah, but there's never been a society in the history of competitive resource capture societies that hasn't had police, because you have to. And it's just, that's the way it plays out. That's the way the world kind of works, you know. And so, you know, and that's like gets in that libertarian camp, like, well, we'll hire private security, and I go, that doesn't work either, dum dum. Like, it just, and it's not as if someone's not tried that before. You know, they have. Like, there's
Well, and
not.
that's what our society was for years. When, like in your book, and you talk about the reef of the Shire. The Shire reef
Right.
did his job because it was just sort of a needed thing, and but that was a naturally occurring organic role for someone to have, and he didn't do it for free.
Right. Yeah. He did not. They, you know, just that function of like, what do you do in, you know, there's a great quote from the policing literature, like the criminological literature, from a guy named Egon Bittner, who's a phenomenal criminological researcher from the 60s and 70s. And he said, police are there to deal with the something that ought not to be happening is happening right now, and about which someone needs to do something now, you know? And that can be everything from there's a cat in a tree to, you know, there's a fire to there's, you know, Martians invading. It's like, who do you call? Because you can't have a specialized role for every emergency in the world, right? But you can have a broad thing that can sort that shit out, and that's the cops. And right now, police are terribly broken in what their mandate is, because that, if you talk about something that ought not to be happening and about which someone needs to do something now, that role means order maintenance, you know, and that's what police historically did from, you know, the early British version of it, and what's his face's blue locusts, the swarm of locusts that were going to rein in crime kind of thing, to where they become now, where they're law enforcement. You go, that's a completely different idea, and it corrupts the process. It corrupts the purpose of the police to make them law enforcers. You know, it's different than order maintainers, you know, but under an order maintenance kind of thing, it's like, but that's the, you get the kick in the pants. Hey, knock it off. Don't do that again. And, you know, maybe they'll arrest you because you're drunk. And, you know, but I was talking with that kid Grafton here, and he said, well, I asked him, what are the cops like here? And he go, well, they're really good. They're really good at de-escalation. But the way, like, if they got someone who's screaming and yelling and freaking out in the middle of the street, they'll have one guy talking to him going, hey, man, I understand where you come from. Just de-escalate. And then they'll have everyone else just kind of slowly closing in on them, you know. And then if it looks like they're not going to talk them out of it, by the time they have them surrounded and contained, they go, look, dude, we don't want to take you to jail, but if you keep going, look around, you know.
Right.
And usually they're like, yeah, you're right. I don't want to fight with all of you. You know, I'm surrounded. But, you know, American cops, the first thing they want to do is cowboy up and you know, start issuing commands, and, you know, and they
Well, there's so much. Yeah, and as you're aware, I mean, there's so much pressure on, say, you know, road and field patrol level policing, that it went from the law is the law and we enforce laws to just, well, we want you to do it in all these certain ways. We want it to be nicer here and quick and hard there. And also we want you to do case management and be mentally health trained. And we want you to do everything and just be that everything guy all the time. And it's like an impossible job.
Yeah.
And so, do we want like specific centralized police officers to try to do everything, or is that system just much more distributed in a community where, what is this guy's deal? What's his problem? What's he got going on here? Right. And he could go left, right, or forward or backwards depending on what the need is for the community and who's good at that thing. And in the hardest cases, yeah, they probably have to be held somewhere and put away for a while.
Maybe.
But I don't know. It was interesting because there was a one point that I'd made with Robin was that, you know, and I think maybe you see it this way as well, but I see my job largely more and more as managing public health concerns, public health, including behavioral health, which is not just criminal thinking, but stuff driven by trauma, illness, drug addiction, and then, yeah, on the tail end of that, there's crime. That on a Bitcoin standard, if communities and people were getting healthier broadly over time, there's just less sick people in the world. Not that you're not going to have some of that, but there's just, you'd have a healthier community. Right. So then there'd be less need for a police officer that does everything all the time, running around and playing whack-a-mole. And maybe you need less police because community is just generally healthier. a podcast that I saw with Michael Malice just yes, I think it dropped a few days ago, and he was on um, the Twins podcast, and they were these couple of big bodybuilding bros that are hilarious as hell. Funny podcast, and I love Michael Malice just because he's such a personality. Whether you agree with him or not, he's smart. They were like, "Well, what about police? What about courts? What about judges? Yeah, like we need this stuff." And he says, "We can do that. You know, we have HOAs, we have organizations that people want for areas of community that enforce things, but it's collaborative, and then they come up with rules and they can change the rules." But he said we might have more police. And it's like, more police? Well, yeah, but not like, so in a department, you're not going to say have those 5 to 10 guys in a small community that try to do everything 24 hours. You're going to have maybe more distributed, as needed on call folks that do a variety of different things when that area is needed. Right. And community building wise, it'd be like, oh, we have this kind of an issue. Well, there's this guy and that guy that do that kind of a thing. Like, hey, an alligator climbed out of the canal over there. Oh, well, these guys do that. Oh, this guy's houseless and starving over here. Okay, well, these people over here help with that. There's a guy actually breaking and entering. Okay, well, these guys do that. And it could be more distributed. And if you call it policing, or as far as like community management, it's not going to be like the police or emergency services. It might be more of a distributed, hey, we take care of each other in a variety of ways depending on what's going on as needed.
Yeah.
And it could be very broad. It could be like more broad and more shallow, not such a spear that dives in and pokes at that and fixes. Because I think policing can be a burnout job because people expect everything.
Yeah, I mean, like if that was the sort of topic of discussion of the podcast, which it sounds like it was, I'm reminded when people start talking about policing almost universally, especially people that don't work in law enforcement. It reminds me of like, hey, I'm new to Bitcoin and I'm here to fix it, right? And I go, not you, but like if the podcast guy goes, maybe there'll be more cops and we'll just have specialized role. And I go, yeah, you haven't really thought about this enough, And the problem is even like the social justice warriors that come along and go like, oh, we need to have, crisis intervention teams and all this kind of stuff. And you go, okay. And then just go talk to a cop and go, how many times have you got a call that said, we got a kid who's breaking windows? You go, okay. And then you show up and you go, shit, there's a gang of kids with shotguns. They're not breaking windows. They're trying to set fire to this building. Nobody fucking told me that. And you go, so you got your crisis response team out there. You got the graffiti abatement team that shows up and goes, hey, kids. And then all of a sudden they're confronted with a bunch of people with shotguns. Now you have additional victims on the scene, right? And now you have additional problems of coordination on the scene. And now you have to scramble the troops. And now you've got, like all those things can go sideways in 2 seconds flat. All it takes is one person to start stabbing the crisis response person before they go, oh, now we need the cops. Well, it's too late. Someone's already dead, dum-dum. You needed the cops to begin with, and then maybe the crisis response team can come after the cops are there. But by the time the cops are there, they're already fucking up the system because they're already talking to the guy the wrong way, and it's all upside down and broken already. So you go, how does that fix that? It doesn't. It exacerbates some of these problems instantaneously with good intentions. You go, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And again, it goes back to that Hanlon's razor thing, right? You go like, don't attribute to malice what can reasonably be explained with incompetence or stupidity. And those ideas about policing they're hard to get. I mean, the easy fix for policing is you go, well, we don't need to fix cops. We know what the cops' job is. They need to maintain order. But they need to be, like there's a famous article in the policing literature that's called Willie Sutton, or no, it's Florence Nightingale in Pursuit of Willie Sutton. And Florence Nightingale was a well-renowned nurse. Back in the day, it was well regarded for doing all this heroic medical care and being one of these caring, compassionate people. Right. And Willie Sutton was a bank robber. Yeah, and that's the researcher's title. It became famous for a reason because it's a really great article about like that job is tough, as you pointed out, because you can be called on to show up and go, hey, my cat's stuck in a tree, my daughter's drowning. You go, well, I'm the people they call for that. I'm going to have to go figure out how to pluck someone out of a lake, or I have to go figure out how to get a car out of a thing, or help rescue someone from a fire, or get in a shootout with somebody, or chase some kid down, or wrangle a drunk, or break up a fight, or get in the middle of a domestic dispute, or get in the middle of, I mean, it's just endless. And there's a reason why cops like that shit, because they're like, you never know what you're going to get, right? But to think that you can bifurcate or trifurcate or quantum, like if you can break those out into a quantum level, I go, you may as well just have everybody devoted to policing all the time, and then kind of defeats the purpose, right? So, like under a Bitcoin standard, the thing I think would change with policing is the thing that needs to change with policing, regardless if it's fiat or Bitcoin. You go, these people are not investigators. They're not there to investigate crime. They're not there to build a case for the DA. They're not there to do any of that shit. They're there to make sure that whatever screwed up thing is happening stops, period. And that's it. And that's why they're entrusted with lethal force, because they are the ones that can make you stop doing shit, right? And so, but as soon as you just shift that focus away, but the incentive structure right now is broken, as you know. Like the DA is incentivized to prosecute crime, and they're incentivized, and the cops are now incentivized right now. Like these guys, you take low power, low status people, put a badge and a gun in their hand, and then send them out to be investigators, and then entrust them with lethal force and tell them you're rule enforcers, and they start acting like that exactly, which is they show up at a place and they go, you need to stop this now, and this and that and the other thing. They'll grab people and just do a lot of things that are fundamentally offensive to any human being that interacts with them. Nobody likes it when they show up because they're a bunch of dicks and they act like dicks, and they don't think through a problem. They just come in with force. One of the things that one of our local sheriffs said that I thought was brilliant was he said, because I said, like the Los Angeles Police Department has some of the best training in the world. True, 100% true from a tactical standpoint. I said, have you ever considered sending your guys down there? And he goes, no, I think they should all come here, because when you're in a big force, you can get 2 or 3 guys to show up and help you out any time of day or night. They're going to be there. So one of my guys can be 40 miles from the next call. So you need to figure out how to talk to people. You need people thanking you when you're arresting them, not getting in a fight with them because they might kill you. And right. I thought, yeah, he's 100% right. And you look at the way some of these small town sheriffs deal with stuff, it's way different than the LAPD does, or NYPD, or Chicago police, or whatever. And while they're giving them all this stupid de-escalation training and telling them you're a law enforcer and you got to go, command and control and de-escalate and provide mental health services, like your local sheriff can do that shit just because he knows the population and he's not out there trying to beat the shit out of people and force them into doing stuff. And the ones that do, the local sheriff, if he's got half a brain in his head, tells him, knock that shit off. We don't do that here. You're going to get somebody killed, probably yourself. So,
Stop the threat.
Yeah, exactly. Stop the
threat. Yeah,
threats.
I know. I've had, over the decades I've been in law enforcement, I've had so many different kinds of training, everything from active shooter and, barge down the door and searches and arrests and fighting and all that, which on one part of the job, you want to know how that goes.
Right.
But boy, I can't count how many interactions I've had that involved simply de-escalation, some semblance of rapport, listening, slowing things down, and like what's going on here? But you got to shift gears. You approach something and yeah, maybe he has a knife, but right. What does he need? Are you right. gonna? I mean, you don't want to get killed. There's always that in your thought.
Yeah.
And you see good and bad responses to that. He's coming at you with a knife. There's only so many things to do. Okay. Options are limited. There's right. other times where the distance is there. He's willing to talk. You can understand what he needs and he'll set it down. Yeah. Or you come to some terms, not that he's not getting arrested or going to go somewhere, but yeah, it's like as the white blood cells are in a human body, it's like you want an immune system for a community. You want to be the white blood cells and, where's the infection and encapsulate that and get rid of it or clean it. Right. But with a Bitcoin standard, if Satoshi's militia was in charge, you could heal illness through exercise and nutrition and exercising your distributed and well-hashed immune system versus saying we just kind of struggle along eating garbage and not exercising, and now we've got cancer and okay, radiation time or surgery.
Right.
And sometimes it's like society is sick, and so when things are bad, well, you got to lance that boil here and there, you got to cut that lump there, we're going to radiate you,
Yeah.
because that's what we know to do, and because things are bad. But anyway, in the long view of it all, what I was trying to get at with Robin was that as society were to get, say, more healthy, if society was healthy, we wouldn't be doing these surgical attack the threat type, you know, uh,
Approaches.
contain a tumor time and time and time again. It would just be, hopefully, those would be more anomalies,
Right.
because society generally would be integrated, and the department would be Satoshi's militia. So
Right.
anyway,
Well, I mean, I think you're spot on in the regard, and that's I mean, I always trace all this shit back to my book because I go, look, man, if you fix the incentive structure, then the root causes of people acting like this go way down, right? So there's just less need. There's always going to be somebody who's going to get in a fist fight out there. There's always going to be someone who's going to be smashing up a bar, or they're going to get pissed, jealous of their wife, or whatever it is. There's always going to be somebody somewhere that's raising hell.
yeah.
The thing is, if it's like I've been walking around here in Prague, and it's just the most mellow thing in the world. And the kid Grafton I was talking about earlier said, "Look, man, my girlfriend routinely walks through every part of town at 3 o'clock in the morning without a second thought." And you go, "But what's the incentive structure look like here?" And you go, "Well, it's their history was communist rule for a long time, and the country had basically been invaded and then forced to become communist, and
Yeah.
they have a much deeper appreciation for the freedoms they have right now." And they respect that, and it's reflected in the law enforcement, it's reflected in the culture, it's reflected in how people interact with each other. Like I've seen 2 homeless beggars on the street since I've been here, and I'm in Old Town, and I go, just go to Old Town Portland, tell me what it looks like. It's not great. Go to Old Town Seattle, go to Old Town anywhere in any city in America right now, it's a
I was
shithole.
in New Orleans yesterday,
Yeah.
and my boy and I, we went to the World War II Museum. Now, not to go off on a tangent, but there is some interesting stuff I want to share on our channel here later, perhaps. But we've been traveling across the country. We went to Four Corners, Mexico, interesting slice of history, the Navajo Nation. We went down to Billy the Kid's grave and what was going on with law enforcement and corruption back then. Billy the Kid, I learned a lot about that back in the Old West in New Mexico.
Yeah.
And then we went to the Alamo. I'm speechless.
Yeah.
I kind of thought, okay, yeah, it's cool. It's hollowed ground. It means a lot to me now. And I got a new U.S. flag from the Alamo that was flown on May 27th this year. I had to buy it. A new flag for my backdrop. I'll have an American flag flown at the Alamo.
Nice.
I feel patriotic that way. Then we go to the World War II Museum in New Orleans, and my grandpa was in World War II as a medic, as we talked about, flanking behind Patton and cleaning up concentration camps, and just the most horrid, nightmarish stuff that he died with. And that really hit me. I saw, infantry Division 103 patches and what they did, and it just hit me really hard. I was like, wow. Think of what you will about World War I, World War II, and all that, but you had people like my grandpa fighting in that for reasons they believed in, and it just was really amazing. Then we walk from there down to the French Quarter. Talk about time preference.
Yeah.
Time preference. Maybe Prague has a longer time preference in a sense of history and what it's doing there. New Orleans, if I had to look at it from a time preference perspective, you're talking drugs and alcohol and sex and costume-ish stuff, big casinos, gambling, a lot of bullshit, frankly, but also fun, party fun.
Yeah.
We're walking down Canal Street and the whole Mardi Gras type scene.
Yeah.
You talk about homeless people, probably 2 every half block. And I don't judge it, but it's where are you going to go if you've got to sign up and you want a joint? I mean, hello. Yeah. So quite a juxtaposition, I imagine, Prague and New Orleans that were both in proximity to here right now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll tell you. I mean, it's this city is beautiful. I haven't seen a fist fight since I've been here. I haven't seen people arguing in a bar. I don't see any obese people here. I mean, literally none. I've not seen a single obese person since I've been here. I mean, it might be a couple of gals walking around carrying a little extra baggage, but
I can't say the same for the people walking down Canal Street.
right,
I
100%.
mean,
You were in the middle of the fat zone right
oh
now.
my God.
Yeah,
Hey, you want some deep fried donut?
yeah. Deep fried
They're
donuts,
good.
deep fried Twinkie. They are good. You know, I mean, but that is some super fiat food, man.
Time preference food.
Yeah, seriously, man. And it's sort of embarrassing. I mean, right now, I'm sort of embarrassed to be American. You know, like it's because I look at the state of the world and I go, man, we're just not doing things right now. I mean, we're all kinds of upside down and broken, and it's reflected in everything we do. I bought a little fiat food thing here, like some little Czech pastry chocolate thing, and I was like, oh. And I've been trying not to eat that kind of crap. You know, I've been losing weight and stuff like that, and trying to, you know, I mean, I'm on the Bitcoin standard, right? And I'm doing my exercise and all that kind of stuff.
Hey, you're on vacation, you know, a homemade
Yeah, so
beignet.
yeah, well, I gave myself a little break, and I said, okay, I'm gonna eat a little chocolate pastry thing, and I had like a little, what you call it, peach, like a little peach cobbler thing from the venue. And the thing is, I looked at the ingredients on the back, and you know what it was? It was like wheat and sugar, and like there was not any noxious chemical, anything that I could identify. I went to the local McDonald's here, and I tried a burger, and I went, wow, this burger is half the cost of the United States, the full size that I remember from the 90s, and it tastes like hamburger. I was like, what's going on here? Like, this isn't a Big Mac anymore, because I'm so, like, if you go get a Big Mac in America right now, the patties are like that big, and it doesn't taste like hamburger meat, you know. But the EU passed a bunch of food laws. They just, three-fourths of the additives in our food they don't allow here. It's against the law, but it
Right.
tastes like food. And I was like, oh yeah, McDonald's used to be food. Now it's not. And so it's just tip to tail. Like America has just been, you know, stripped down to like, let's get these people as fat and stupid and, you know, just pathetic and angry at each other as we possibly can, you know? And I don't know, it was weird, man. Like one of my Uber drivers today was like a Ukrainian guy, and I was kind of like, ugh, I don't even want to talk about being American because like heaven only knows what sort of opinions are going to come out of that, right? And but it's just, I don't know, man. It's really eye opening.
Could you
My
live
problem.
there?
Pardon?
Would you live there?
Yeah, in a second. I mean, the thing I was about to say is like I sooner or later I think this place ends up because it's a fiat land, right? And fiat land always ends up in the same spot. They're going to have the same problems we're having in America right now. It's just their can gets kicked for another 20 years. Um, because it's inevitable, and the same corporations, the same corporate pressures, the same, all that shit is coming. I mean, it's happening in most of Europe right now. Like, go look at the UK. I think they sort of kicked themselves in the balls by doing the Brexit thing because now they're not part of the common union. But look what's happening in Germany, and look, you know, I mean, all this kind of stuff. There's decay all around, but it's all fiat
Yeah.
decay. So I don't know, man, but I would certainly live here, like, because it's just nice. It feels like America in the 90s right now. It really does. Like as I walk around here, you know, I'm talking to the Uber guy and I go, hey, so what's it like living here? Because, you know, I met people from Uzbekistan and Hungary and like all over the world are kind of moving here. I go, what's it like? And he goes, well, it's pretty good. You know, like it's easy to find a job. You know, you can pay your bills. It's no problem. I moved here and, you know, the bureaucracy is a little tough. But once I figured it out, I make plenty of money driving my Uber. And I'm just like, what do you mean you make plenty of money? He goes, well, I can pay my rent. I can still go out. And this and that. I'm like, oh, yeah. Well, most people in America can't do that with a job that requires a fucking master's degree, right? So it's like, it's just
Man,
busted.
I so wish I could be there. We're having our own fun here, which I'll share again later. We have stories to tell here as well, just seeing the country and a lot of American roots and history out here.
Yeah.
And I love America. I love it. There's such a diversity. Just as we've traveled, it's amazing to see. What What's been your favorite part so far of your conference experience out there?
Well, I mean, you know, I got like Michael Saylor this morning. I got a picture. I haven't posted it yet, but you know,
Did you
it
get a
was in
picture with him?
No, no, no. It was on the VIP stage. Like this guy I met, he's a Hungarian guy. He's doing like meetups and stuff in Hungary, and he's doing a lot of great work in like with the Hungarian Bitcoin scene. He's an amazing guy. He went and met Michael Saylor, but you know, he's the guy's mobbed, and he was upstairs in the VIP lounge, which you know, there's probably 100 people, and then he was sitting there, and I was 20 feet away watching him talk. I mean, it's his usual like Michael Saylor talking points, and he's an expert at it. And yet, I kind of went, oh, I've heard this stuff 1,000 times, and whatnot. Yeah, and I went down. I felt really blessed that I kind of said, well, I don't want to just sit here, and I was kind of holding a fart, So I was just like, well, I'm gonna go out, and instead of my stomach starting to make noise, I'll just walk out of the room, kind of thing. And then I ran into that Rick guy, and it was right after he had done his speech on the expo stage. And I got to sit down and chat with this guy and another guy from Holland for like half an hour and just had this really great conversation and just talked about all kinds of stuff, Bitcoin and his experience and what he went through. And I got to tell him a little bit about my book. And I got to have that little reaction like, oh my God, I've never heard that before. And I go, great. Yeah, let's talk some more about it, And so it's like 100 of those kind of interactions throughout has been my favorite thing. Like that guy Jeff I was telling you about, I sat down and we talked for probably an hour and a half just sitting there in the lobby, we just started talking and he said, hey, I'm writing a book. And I go, hey, I'm writing a book. What's your book about? And he starts talking about like this conscientiousness and his spiritual journey. And so I told him sort of my journey. And, it was just great having this like exchange of knowledge and ideas, but just having these great conversations with people. There's another guy, Mike, I had met, his Wawa Zawa or Zawa Wawa or something like that on Twitter. Super fascinating guy, super, super smart, but just the depth and the level of the conversation with these people was all because it's all thoughtful and everyone's sort of united in purpose and maybe slightly different in approach, but it was just so refreshing. Like there wasn't a single moment where I was thinking about like, oh my God, my grant funded project, right? Like it was just this nice break of from the matrix, and so that's been the best part of it by far is just interacting with people and feeling that energy and kind of walking
Yeah.
around. That's
Yeah, and
by
it's hard
far
to quantify. That's one thing I've taken away from the conferences I've been to, where it's like you can look at the headliners and the events and say, okay, well, there's that and there's this, and that's cool. And like you said with Sailor, I can watch every podcast, and he can be on stage and say similar stuff, and it's like, yeah, I get it. I mean, it's cool to see in person,
right.
but was that the highlight? I mean, it was
No.
cool, but
Yeah.
it's hard to quantify all the little interactions and little side talks or running into people and just, hey, where are you from? Oh, what do you do? Like
Yeah.
or you're just at a booth, or you just run into somebody, you're sitting next to somebody, and the most random little serendipitous moments turn into a whole like, wow,
Discussion.
I
Yeah.
learned a lot just right now, or that got my brain thinking versus like absorbing a lecture, say, it it's all that little stuff that's hard to define when you say you're going to a conference. Oh, who's there? What's it about? Well, Bitcoin, and it's got Sailor and everybody else.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
But you meet so many people that you don't even realize, just like with your dinner with Sailor or with Sayer,
Right.
Robin Sayer, and or hanging out with Eric Satz, new folks you never knew. So that's cool.
Yeah. Well, like that dinner with Eric was great because it was just a table full. There's probably 10 people at the table. And every conversation was interesting. Every conversation was about something unique and Bitcoin related. And just a slightly different take on things. And and I'm sitting there learning from other people and watching other people and seeing, and it always fills me with positivity. And that's the funniest thing is I think I'm probably one of the more positive people in the Bitcoin space right now. Like even these folks that there's always this like air of doom and gloom sort of hanging over people's heads. But they go, oh, well, everything's going to go to shit, and then we're going to rise up. And there's like a book just came out called The Bushido of Bitcoin, and I saw the trailer. I met that kid that cut that trailer I posted. He cut the trailer for the book Bushido.
Yeah.
It's amazing. The kid does amazing work for editing. Like I'm just so impressed with the work he does. And yet the message of that book is all about like we need to adopt the Warriors Code and this and that. I'm like, ah, God, it all just feels. And it's no dig on him. I'm sure the book is amazing. Like I haven't read it, so I shouldn't say anything other than I saw a trailer. So that's as far as but just the like we need to go back to a time when warriors were pure. And I'm like, we need to go back to a time when people weren't warriors, like where we don't think about fighting each other that way. And just sort of the approach I have. But I keep thinking because one of Saylor's points was like, all your models will be broken, right? And I go, yeah, I don't think even Mr. Saylor understands just how much that means, because I think he's working from a model right now. I need to stack as much Bitcoin as I can, right? And that's going to secure his financial future. And I go, well, I think, and that's why I started saying that stuff about, like, I think there's going to come a point in time when even Michael Saylor himself is going to go, I don't really need 214,000 Bitcoin. I'm actually pretty happy with 1 Bitcoin. That's enough, because I think those incentives change so much that people just are going to be playing a very different game. And I genuinely believe the world is going to be just such a beautiful place. And it's a little frustrating in a way and it's not even frustrating. It's just like, I recognize, I was exactly the same way of just like, oh, everything's going to go to shit. And we're going to, there's going to be a currency collapse, and there's going to be this and hyperinflation and breadlines. And, and I still joke about it. And yet the more and more time I spend thinking about this, and the more and more time I spend reflecting on it and thinking about just the term, all your models would be broken. I go, okay, so you have no model is what that means, right? So what does it mean if you're trying to build something without a model? You go, well, you can build any goddamn thing you want. So it doesn't have to be the world collapses. It doesn't have to be fiat collapse. It doesn't have to be law enforcement goes away. It doesn't have to be the banks die. And if you take the other sort of idea of like Bitcoin doesn't hurt anybody, then you go, it doesn't hurt you to do it, and it changes everything. It breaks all your models. So you go, so what's the world look like? And I go, well, people in competition with a common purpose are amazing. You go, I'm going to race to see who makes the best car, and you don't lose if I win. You go, what does the world look like if everyone is aiming towards making something the best rather than trying to undercut somebody so they can get ahead of them? It's a completely different game, right? And I go, I go, but it's the Jeff Booth thing as well. I mean, those two are such the biggest influences on my thinking right now. Jeff Booth goes, the cost of production brings everything to zero. Technology is deflationary. Okay, great. So world of abundance comes. Great. Yeah, 100%. All your models are broken. Everything's going to get cheaper. Okay, great. So when does the currency collapse problem start? And I go, why would it? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And I think it's easy for people to be fearful, and I understand why. And yet at the end of it, I keep walking away going, I'm still victim of it. I still feel it. I still have those fears. And yet I keep going, I just don't think it's going to work out that way, and that's probably been one of the bigger takeaways from all this, is to hear people talk about things like war and how we're going to fight things and how we're going to have to fight this and fight that. And I'm just like, man, but it's another Jeff Booth thing. He goes, don't give energy to that. But yet everyone's still just so happy to give energy to it. So,
I love
rambling, I guess. But.
Yeah, and I've got some roots in being a prepper. I mean, I'm not going to say, yeah, I'm a prepper. At the same time, I'm totally prepared, and that's meat space world and everything else.
Yeah.
Not because it's zombie apocalypse, but because it's like, do I have some life insurance because I have family? Yeah. Do I think I'm going to die? No, but I have life insurance.
Right.
We've talked a bit about this before, but I think when people realize the model is broken, and also maybe not to say they're new at Bitcoin, but they're absorbing all of it about everything, the system, time preference. Ooh, where am I now in this everything? Is it going to be a gradual great realignment, or a suddenly thing, or a gradually and then suddenly, or what is it? We don't know. It's
Right.
easy to, if you hadn't really prepared on many fronts before, you start sort of with the zombie apocalypse in your head. It's easy to say, well, shit, what, food, water, shelter, what's my property? What's the size of my militia? Is it defensible? Do I have an arsenal? Guns, ammo, gold. Bitcoin shifts all that. And
Right.
so I have a toe in the prep world. Yes,
Yeah.
all the meat space stuff, do that. If you've ignored that, I mean, it's good to know, like, where is your water and food and protection and shelter come from? How does that exist for you? That everybody has a story.
Right.
On the other hand, if it's not going to be a zombie apocalypse, Bitcoin is hope, and how does that look in sort of a great realignment view? And what if I mean, I know plenty of people, they're sitting around just waiting for it to collapse.
Yeah.
And it never does.
Right.
Not the way we
never have.
might you can get your brain around a big collapse. It's hard to
Right.
get your brain around a gradual but broken model shit. Once you have the prep stuff sort of situated, you can kind of say, okay, enough of that. Now what? I mean, it gets into freedom, tech, freedom, money, sex, sure, and the community. And it's actually what I love about the conferences, like you said, it's the positive direction we're going in the future that's hope. It's
Right.
not like, my God, stack now, lock it up, protect it, $5 wrench attacks. Well, don't ignore that. But I
Yeah.
also want to focus on men. There's a lot of exciting, positive, exciting future to have. Like we're heading to a good place. Not that I ignore the idea of having protection or something like a life insurance or how do I take care of my family and fiat? Sure. But Bitcoin, without Bitcoin, you could get stuck in that negative, like, oh, the world's just shit, get ready. Next
Yeah.
year, get ready. Another year
Yeah.
goes by, it's a little worse, get ready. That
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah, it
With
does.
Bitcoin, it's like, no, we can contribute, we can be part of this. When it comes around and is better, we're just right there. And we've been
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
that's what gives me hope. And I just feel, makes me happy. It floats my boat in this space and makes it fun.
Well, 100%, And I guess that my takeaway from all that, like I've been telling people, I'm like uncharacteristically positive and bullish on the future. Like, and I see people fretting, and I see people worrying, and I see people prepping, and I do as well. Like I used to close every one of my articles with "Trust in God, but tie the camel," and for a reason, because you go, well, it's good to have faith, and you still have to be sensible, right? And none of what I'm saying would go against sensibility, right? Just don't just like take off all your clothes and walk around and go, I'm going to be fine, right? Like you have to be, you still have to be coherent. And yet, I think that gradually and suddenly, I think even the staunchest Bitcoiner, including myself, I think the Michael Saylors of the world, I think the Jeff Booths of the world, I think everyone is going to get this just a little bit wrong. And I think it's going to be a little bit wrong in such a positive way that they just kind of, it's going to take them longer to understand how much they are than it will be for them to actually get to that place. Like, I think they'll still be like that sort of disbelief. Like when you come out the other side of if you're hiking through a dark forest and it's just fear and everything, you're like, oh my God, and you've been lost for the last 3 weeks and you feel like you're about to starve. And it's for me, I feel like I go, no, I can see the road right there, and people are like, there's no road, we're gonna die out here, and then all of a sudden they just pop out of the and they go, no, there is a road, and there's a hot dog stand right there, and water and everything I need is just right there. But the second till they popped out of that forest, but that's the gradually then suddenly, but the gradually they don't see it until they're on the other side of it, and I think just there's going to be that moment of people going like, it can't be real. That can't be a real hot dog stand. That it can't really be on the road right now. I can't. There's got to be a bear behind me still. Like I'm still risk, risk, risk. I mean, because they're so predisposed to fighting risk that and yet when you just kind of pop out the other side, you just go, no, no, it's kind of pretty much clear sailing from here on out. Like you just don't have those concerns anymore. And
Um,
and what does that world look like? And I just go, man, I just think it's going to be great. And I wish
yeah.
I had a better way to articulate and share what I'm thinking and feeling about this space right now than I apparently am capable of because
On our road trip, been thinking just sort of like what Einstein would talk, just thought experiments, mind explorations about, mental lab, but trying to imagine, like we've said, what is the Great Realignment? How could that look in different ways? And so I've had a lot of thoughts about that, and we can talk about them another time. But I do like thinking about it. Um, Largely, it's positive, and the changes could be also very difficult at times, but also I think in a way will be okay, or just actually notice like, oh, things are maybe better, and better as you've prepped or not. But anyway, I want to talk about that again later. We're hitting at about an hour and a half here, and I'm sitting
all right,
outside
brother.
and the battery's getting low. I figure
Yeah.
we could wrap this up. Is there any last words you want to say from Prague, and what you got coming next?
Dziękuję.
Kui. Hasta la no.
That is, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you
It's
and
been great,
goodbye.
man. It's it's a beautiful city. If you have an opportunity to get out here sometime, I think everybody, all three of you that watch this, should definitely check out.
Hey, our videos have had 60, 70 views. You know, hey, that's something.
All 60 or 70 of you who may be watching this, you should definitely come out here. It's a beautiful space. It's a beautiful message. And I genuinely believe that within a decade, we're just going to look around and think of this period as just a brief blip of madness of like, what were we thinking? Why were we so worried this whole time? I don't know. But I'll be the
Grant,
guy that was standing at the front of that crowd going, I tried to tell you, it's not that bad. Things
yeah,
are getting better. You just didn't realize it at the time. The healing has already started, just no one's seen it yet. That's all.
Grandpa, tell me about the early Bitcoin colonies and the quiet revolution. I'll be like, grandson, go check out my blog,
Yeah.
2024. I know that was last century, but
Yeah.
you can watch it all online. We were living it.
Yeah. We were right in the middle, baby.
Archive
Hey,
for history.
yeah. All right,
Well,
man. It was
cool.
great chatting with you. I'm glad we got this out today. And yeah.
It's amazing we can do this across the planet,
Yeah, I
live,
know, right?
virtual.
Yeah. Well, I mean, after I quit my fiat mines and just, I don't know. There's a lot of people here that are full-time Bitcoin, man. So it's kind of like, fuck, dude. But, it's just breaking your shackles is tougher than it sounds sometimes.
It's a leap.
Robin, well, Robin was one of the more inspiring people. He just said, I just did it.
He did it.
But he's also a guy that's really good at like sort of chaos as a motivator for him. For me, chaos is like ugh, all right, put on your hat and go, but
I
so,
know. I like
yeah,
plans and structure myself. Not that I'm not impulsive sometimes, but it's hard.
yeah.
Well, cool.
All right, sir.
We'll wrap this up. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.